She stood in front of him like a memory he wasn't ready to reopen, eyes soft, voice trembling, whispering, "I miss us." But he didn't flinch. Didn't break. Didn't let the past wrap around him the way it used to. Instead, he exhaled slowly, the weight of every lie she ever told settling in his chest as he answered, "I miss who you pretended to be." The words sliced through the silence, but her gaze didn't waver. There was something dangerous in the closeness between them, an invisible pull that shouldn't have existed anymore. Her fingers brushed his wrist, barely a touch, but enough to make old heat flicker like a forgotten match. He wasn't supposed to feel anything. And yet, there it was. That familiar spark. That quiet ache. They stood in the dim glow of the streetlight, the night thick with the kind of tension that only two people with unfinished histories could create. She looked at him like she wanted to rewrite the ending. He looked at her like he wasn't sure if he should walk away, or pull her back into the gravity he once lived in. She hadn't just broken trust. She had broken the version of himself he had been with her. And now she stood there, breathing out apologies wrapped in longing, wearing the same perfume that once clung to his pillow, the same expression that used to undo him. He could almost taste the past on the air. Almost feel the warmth of the nights they used to share. Almost believe she meant it this time. Almost. Her voice softened, barely above a whisper. "Can we just talk? Please?" And for a moment, just a moment, he considered it, because the way she looked at him felt like a door he knew better than to open, but somehow still kept the key for. Then she stepped closer. Close enough that he could hear her breath catch. Close enough that he could see the truth she never said. That was when he realized, this wasn't just a conversation. This was a cliff, one wrong step and everything would fall back into place, or fall apart completely. He didn't move. Neither did she. The night held its breath. And the question hung between them, trembling, electric, dangerous. What happens next? The silence stretched between them, thin as glass and just as easy to shatter. He hadn't moved since her last step forward, and she hadn't dared take another. But something in the air shifted, fragile, charged, waiting. "Say something," she whispered, her voice trembling enough to crack even the strongest resolve. He swallowed, jaw tightening. "I don't know what you want from me." Her eyes softened. "The truth. Just the truth of what you feel right now." That was the problem. What he felt was far from simple. She stood so close he could see the tiny rise and fall of her breath, the faint warmth brushing his chest each time she exhaled. He shouldn't have noticed these things. He shouldn't have cared. But his heart gave him away long before his words did. She always had this effect on him, quiet, powerful, dangerous. He looked away, staring at the ground as though answers were hiding between the cracks in the pavement. "You hurt me," he murmured. "More than you know." Her hand hovered near his arm, hesitant, trembling. "I know. And I'm not asking you to forget it. I miss the way you looked at me. Like I mattered." He closed his eyes. He shouldn't remember that look. He shouldn't let those memories rise like soft ghosts. But the night was cruel. It held their past in its palms and offered it back to him, warm and tempting. "Don't do that," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Talk like the past was perfect." She stepped closer, slow, cautious, as if her feet knew the path even when her voice didn't. "It wasn't perfect," she admitted. "But it was real. You were real. And I lost that because I wasn't." The honesty hit him unexpectedly, deeper than any apology she'd previously tried to offer. He turned his head toward her, just slightly. Their faces were close enough that her breath skimmed his cheek, close enough that his pulse betrayed him. Her fingers brushed his sleeve, barely grazing the fabric. A small, accidental touch, but it felt like lightning. He didn't pull away. "You don't have to take me back," she whispered, eyes glistening. "Just don't shut me out." He exhaled shakily. Her closeness, her voice, the familiar scent on her skin, it all wrapped around him like a memory he had tried to bury but never could. He opened his eyes, meeting hers with a raw, unfiltered truth. I'm not shutting you out, he said. But letting you in, that's the part one don't know how to do anymore. She searched his face, eyes lingering on the slope of his jaw, the tightness in his expression, every detail she once knew by heart. And for the first time tonight, he didn't stop her from looking. The space between them wasn't empty anymore. It pulsed, slow, warm, dangerous. And neither of them stepped back. The night wrapped around them like a slow exhale, warm enough to soften the edges of everything sharp between them. He didn't step closer, but he didn't step back either. And that was dangerous. That was where everything had always begun. She studied him carefully, as if memorizing the parts of him she thought she'd lost forever. You're still afraid of me, she murmured, not accusing, just discovering the truth out loud. He let out a quiet, humorless breath. I'm afraid of us, he corrected. Afraid of what we turn into when we stop pretending we don't care. Her eyes flickered. She felt that. He felt it too. She shifted her weight, her shoulder brushing his for barely half a second, a touch so light it shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. His pulse jumped, traitorous and loud in his own ears. She noticed. Of course she noticed. That tiny spark pulled her closer by instinct, but she forced herself to stop. To hold still. Because she didn't trust herself around him, not with this closeness, not with this gravity that dragged everything sensible out of reach. Why didn't you call me back? She whispered. Not even once. He stared at her for a long, quiet moment. His voice dropped, steady but threaded with something he didn't want to admit. Because I knew if I heard your voice, I'd forgive you too fast. Her breath caught. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. Her fingers trembled at her side. She wanted to reach for him. To touch his jaw, his hand, anything that could ground her in the moment she'd been dreaming of ever since everything fell apart. But she didn't move. Not yet. You think forgiving me would make you weak? She said. He looked at her, really looked, quiet, heavy, longing simmering just beneath the surface. No, he said softly. I think wanting you does. A silence cracked open between them. Her eyes didn't leave his lips. His gaze drifted to hers, and stayed. For one suspended breath, it felt like the world tilted toward them. Like one of them might lean in. Like the night itself was nudging them forward, whispering that desire could win if they let it. His hand lifted, hesitating, hovering beside her waist. He didn't touch her, but she felt the warmth of him, the intention of him, the danger of how much he still wanted. Then he pulled back. Quickly. Sharply. Almost painfully. She swallowed hard. Why did you stop? He shook his head, voice low and wrecked. Because if I touch you, I won't stop there. She closed her eyes, breath shivering out of her. The confession didn't push her away. It pulled her deeper. When she opened her eyes, they weren't inches apart anymore. They were in the space between right and wrong, past and future, want and restraint. Neither moved. Neither dared. But the longing. God, it was everywhere. The night pressed closer, wrapping the empty street around them like a secret. Every sound, the distant hum of traffic, a lone dog barking far off, felt muted, as though the world itself was holding its breath for them. He took a slow, deliberate step toward her, and the space between them hummed with electricity, taut and fragile. Her eyes widened just slightly, catching his movement. She didn't move back. She couldn't. Her heart betrayed her with a rapid rhythm, betraying everything she had tried to control. She wanted him to stay, to close the distance that had grown for far too long, but she feared the gravity that pulled her toward him. I never stopped thinking about you, she whispered, voice quivering as if the admission might shatter her. Even when I tried to forget, I couldn't. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink into the parts of him he had tried to protect. When he opened them again, they were fixed on hers, unwavering. And I never stopped noticing the parts of you I used to love, the parts one knew were real. He said, voice low and raw, each syllable weighed with years of restrained longing. A shiver passed between them. She felt it, Not in the air, not in her skin, but in the space between their chests, where heat pooled silently, insistently. She tilted her head slightly, as though daring him to come closer. He mirrored her movement almost imperceptibly, and suddenly, the gap felt impossibly small, electric enough to ignite without a single word more. Her fingers lifted, trembling, brushing against the sleeve of his coat. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't meant to be a touch, but it was. And he felt it, deep in the pulse of his chest. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, breathing in the scent he knew so well, the warmth of her presence pressing against the edges of every rational thought he had left. Why did we let it end? She murmured, barely audible. He hesitated, then whispered, because we were scared of losing ourselves in each other again. Her eyes softened, searching his. For a long second, they moved as one, their foreheads almost touching, breaths mingling. Time slowed. Everything else, the world, the past, the reasons, the pain, dissolved into the electricity buzzing between them. And in that suspended silence, the night held its breath. Neither moved further. Neither spoke. But in that space, every heartbeat, every sigh, every lingering glance said more than words ever could. It was a moment on the edge of everything. The night unfolded like a secret they had been keeping from the world, and from themselves. Rain had begun to fall, soft and steady, blurring the edges of the streetlights into halos of amber and gold. Each drop kissed their skin, cold and electric, but they barely noticed. They were lost in the warmth of being together again, in the unspoken understanding that all the walls they had built could finally crumble tonight. He reached for her, not in a hurry, not with demand, but with reverence. Her hand brushed his, and when their fingers entwined, it was as if time bent around them. The city faded. The rain faded. Even the years of silence and guarded hearts seemed to dissolve in the quiet intimacy of that simple touch. Her breath melted into his as they leaned closer, foreheads resting together. Every heartbeat echoed between them, loud in their chests, slow and relentless. His lips hovered near her temple, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin against her own. Her eyelashes flicked down, brushing her cheek, as if the moment itself had weight and texture. "This feels like home," she whispered, voice trembling but steady. "And it should," he replied, soft but firm. "We lost it once, but we didn't lose each other." They moved together without words. Their shoulders touched, and then their arms, subtle, deliberate, exploring the spaces that had been empty for far too long. Their bodies spoke the words they couldn't say aloud: longing, forgiveness, desire, fear, all intertwined in one slow, shared rhythm. Every brush of skin against skin, every sigh that trembled into the night, carried the weight of the months they had spent apart. The rain fell harder now, drumming on the pavement and on their coats, turning the world into a private cocoon. She tilted her head, letting the water streak her hair, and he leaned in just enough to feel it warm against his neck. Every nerve felt alive, every small motion magnified into significance. They didn't rush. There was no need. Each moment stretched endlessly, like music played at the perfect tempo, each note lingering just long enough to make the next unforgettable. A soft laugh escaped her as he rested his forehead against hers, a laugh full of relief and longing and love that had nowhere else to go. He cupped her face gently, fingertips grazing her jaw, and she leaned into the touch. For a suspended heartbeat, they existed only in the space between their bodies, only in the warmth, only in the silent conversation their hearts were having. And in that rain-soaked night, with the city around them blurred and glowing, they finally let go of fear, of doubt, of everything that had held them apart. They didn't need words anymore. The night, the rain, the closeness, they said everything for them. The morning light spilled into the apartment in lazy golden streaks, catching motes of dust in the air, painting the room with quiet intimacy. He was awake first, staring at the ceiling, fingers tangled in the blankets, heart still thrumming with the remnants of last night. The memory of her breath on his skin, the warmth of her against him, lingered like perfume, soft, insistent, impossible to ignore. She stirred beside him, eyes blinking open slowly, the kind of sleepy vulnerability that made his chest tighten. For a moment, they didn't speak. The silence was heavy with everything unsaid: regret, longing, fear, and a strange, fragile hope. "Morning," she whispered finally, voice raw and hushed. "Morning," he replied, his tone neutral, though nothing about him felt calm. They lay side by side, inches apart but not touching, each wrapped in the afterglow of the night, each wrestling with their own thoughts. He wondered if what they shared was a fleeting reprieve from reality, or the first breath of something enduring. She wondered the same. Her fingers brushed against his hand unintentionally, then withdrew, unsure if she was seeking comfort or testing the limits of forgiveness. He felt the pang of wanting her closer, of wanting to erase the months of distance in one motion, but he stayed still. The restraint wasn't about self-control. It was about survival, about understanding that last night had changed the rules. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly, eyes fixed on the ceiling, voice tinged with fear and curiosity. He hesitated. "No," he said finally. "But I'm scared of what it means." She laughed quietly, bitter and beautiful, a sound that mirrored his own conflicted heart. "I am too." The doorbell rang suddenly, slicing through the fragile cocoon they had built around themselves. Both startled, they glanced toward the sound, hearts jumping in tandem. She exchanged a look with him, a mixture of apprehension and quiet acknowledgement. The world had returned, uninvited. He moved to answer, and when the door swung open, either of them expected to see her sister standing there, eyes wide, holding a letter. A small, tremulous smile flickered across her lips, and the air thickened with the weight of secrets waiting to be unearthed. In that instant, the intimacy of last night felt both distant and deeper, as if the night had given them a glimpse of what was possible. But now the outside world demanded reckoning. He and she exchanged a glance, fleeting, loaded, unspoken. Whatever had begun between them, it wasn't over. And the truth waiting at the doorstep promised to test it all. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of the morning sun. They stood side by side on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, sharing the quiet warmth of the moment without speaking. Her head rested gently against his shoulder, his fingers tracing absent patterns along her arm, a silent rhythm that spoke of forgiveness, understanding, and something more enduring than desire. This feels like closure," she murmured, eyes half closed in contentment. "Not perfect, but enough." He pressed a soft kiss to her temple, the movement tender, deliberate, like he was sealing every fragile piece of the past between them. "Enough is all we need," he said, voice low, steady, filled with a warmth that hadn't been there for months. They didn't need to discuss what had been, or what might come. The tension, the longing, the heartbreak, all of it had been acknowledged, felt, and softened in the quiet intimacy of this shared morning. Her breath warmed against his neck, and he closed his eyes, letting the simplicity of their closeness anchor him. A breeze drifted past, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something indefinable, hope, maybe, or the memory of a love that had almost been lost. She tilted her face toward him, lips brushing the line of his jaw in the lightest, most fleeting touch. It wasn't hunger, not exactly, it was acknowledgement. A promise without words. He rested his forehead against hers, and for a moment, the world narrowed to this one quiet balcony, one soft connection, one shared heartbeat. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Every sigh, every lingering glance, every brush of skin was enough to speak the language they'd both been learning all over again. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across their entwined forms, they simply existed together. No past shadows, no regrets, no lingering doubts, just the warmth of two hearts choosing peace. When they finally pulled back, the moment didn't end, it lingered, like perfume in a room, a memory of tenderness and desire perfectly balanced. They walked inside, side by side, carrying the quiet knowledge that what they had was real, flawed, human, and worth every heartbeat. The past wouldn't be forgotten. But the present? The present was theirs.